Okay, everybody, welcome to week number 3. And as I said, every time I hold these courses, these weeks are going to fly by. So here we go. All right, this week, first of all, thank you for all that did the discussion topic. There's a couple that I'm going to pull up. So not to embarrass anyone, but rock on for all of you that did it. Just FYI at the bottom here, if you didn't notice, the class recordings, I am putting them down here. So it's at the bottom on the right. Each usually when we complete the class, usually in about 2-3 hours later, the recording appears for me. You can access them anytime in the Zoom classroom. But they do say it'll only last 30 days. So I post them to my YouTube channel, and that's what this link takes you to as well. If you haven't played, just as an FYI for everybody, if you haven't looked at these, when you go to cloud recordings, any of these classes here, so what I do is I just post the video, but there's actually an audio only as well as a transcript of all the chat. So anything you say, it's on there. But also when you play the recording here, it's actually on the right, giving you a whole transcript of the words that we're saying as well. And it does it pretty good, transcribing all the words that we're saying. So just an FYI on that. Okay. Sorry, I'm not feeling well today. So if my voice is odd, that's why. One of those mornings. Okay, so this week we're talking BIM execution plan. So we're going through this progression, this story, and ideally they always say when we teach a college course, it's like I want you to be able to leave this course and just be able to 100% step into our industry and just get submerged into what the expectation would be. So the way this course has been structured, obviously we talked about what is BIM, heavy focus last week on these client requirements. And every time, even yesterday, I was just in a dialogue with a couple of the senior partners of one of the firms I'm associated with. And it went straight to how do you analyze contracts? How do you figure out what clients need? How do you ensure that what you're bound to do, you're actually able to do? So last week we talked about owner requirements, so the whole EIR, the concept of that, understanding or helping to prompt a client to state, this is what I want, this is what I think I want. And oftentimes it's that, and taking thoughts that are in their heads. Remember, they go to Autodesk University, wherever it is across the globe, they watch webinars, they're scoping down LinkedIn, seeing all this technology. Somebody in their organization dreams up saying, oh, you know what, that might be good for us. Then it gets in a contract. And then how do you get from that to actually realizing it at the project level? So that's what was last week. This week, we're going to talk about the BIM execution plan itself, what it means, how to go through it. I'm going to spend a bit of time on this LOD matrix, and then we'll go from there because everybody seems to be familiar with LOD 100 to 500, or at least aware of its existence. And then next week, we're going to get, I love talking about all the different softwares, and it's nowhere near comprehensive and exclusive, but putting on the table next week, just debunking that myth of BIM is Revit. No, BIM is potentially so much. And then you can see as we progress. And when we get to week 9, the legal piece is going to be very interesting. And usually it's stuff that you haven't been exposed to yet. Sometimes it's a little dry. Try to make it exciting. It's legal. I don't know. We'll deal with that. So this week, the online activity was a look at and a compare of the 2 BIM execution plans. So what I did is I delivered online, let me close that, and I delivered to you online basically the US and the UK BIM execution plans. So you can see here, I have a lot of stuff, and I'm going to kind of poke back and forth into these. But what was in that zip file would be basically what's delivered from Penn State. So saving you going to try to find it. And as you pointed out, I had a broken link in the course. So, you know, the BIM execution plan is all of this. Oftentimes I say to people, you know, look at this guide first. It kind of gives an outline of what's there. They deliver a lot here, and sometimes I scratch my head as to why. But you know, they say, you know, if you want it in Word format, PowerPoint, Visio, they give you a little bit of everything. So I guess that's all good. And it's a template. So because it's a template, it's meant to be, you know, viewed as a foundational document that you can then augment, add to, etc. I'll show the process maps in a bit and what we can do with some of those. So it's, you know, pretty powerful. And then the question I asked you in the online is, how does it differ from what we have in the UK? Because the UK, the CPICS organization, they deliver their own template. And that's cool. Some of you interestingly pointed out, and rightfully, these appendices that come with the UK, very different than what comes with the North American. And then the assessment forms. These are all delivered by the UK. And for me, it's so vastly important that you state we're going to do something and then to assess whether you're capable of doing it or not. Just so you're aware, what I've done in the IBI level, at IBI group, we practice, a lot of global firms practice, right, in more than one country. So I have the joy of all my career, I've had UK offices. So I've always had to hear the UK is different than North America, and that's fine. So what we've done is we kind of deliver an IBI group BIM execution plan, specific for the UK and then specific for the rest of the world. And one other thing you'll note, somebody pointed out in the discussion, the acronym of BEP in the UK versus BXP in North America, just is what it is, or rest of the world. We formatted the UK plan to look somewhat like what's delivered by the UK organization. So in the industry, there is that familiarity of that appearance. So he said, okay, we'll complement that. Sorry, I should have opened it prior to starting. Come on. I love how when I hit share screen on Zoom, the entire computer just slows. Look at this. Word does not take this long to open. Imagine what it does to a Revit model. Okay, when that decides to open, yeah, we'll come back to that, I guess. And we did the pre-contract and the post-contract, so we wanted to complement that as well. Yeah, that's not good, whatever it's doing. All right, I'll just leave it. It will open eventually. And then in the North American side, we did the same thing. We have an execution plan. Now, what we wanted to make sure was take the best of both worlds. So in North America, because we didn't have, or we don't have templates for EIRs and for the assessment forms, at IBI Group, we just put them into place. And we said, let's just make an appendix. So here's our version of the EIR. And that's what I posted last week, was just a generic version, a non-UK version of the EIR, a non-UK version of the 3 assessment forms. So vehemently important, and I can't stress how important it is to ask these questions. So we said, we're just gonna make them, and they're there. Okay, so since it finally opened, I'll open the North American one as well. So this is what we did at IBI. We said, look, we'll grab those templates. This is the UK one, very similar in appearance to what's delivered by CPICS. And we just added things to it that we may want to make IBI specific, or we might have dropped a couple things from the North American one that didn't exist here in the UK one. And then vice versa in North America, very similar. We tried to format it the same. We have this IBI green rubbish that we want to maintain, but all of the sections are the same as what was in the delivered one from Penn State. And we might have added a thing or two in from the UK, which made sense as well. So this back and forth, for me, great. From the perspectives of all of you, I'm just showing this, but what I want you to just be familiar with, are these delivered ones, which is what I had in the zip file. And as we progress into, or I guess towards the final assignment, what I've noticed is most often what's grabbed is the North American one, grab the template, and away you go and deliver. And you'll probably be doing the same thing in a couple other parts of the course as well, of the whole curriculum of your other classes. So with that, let me just make sure nothing was popped up. Okay. Two interesting posts. So I just wanted to show a couple pieces here. So if this is yours, rock on. If it's not yours, nothing against what any of you wrote. I just wanted to grab this. This I found intriguing here. So the UK seems to have a contractual approach, trying to establish clear communication between client and bidding company, especially noticed by the EIR, the assessment forms, etc. Penn State seems to be more orientated to the BIM company to plan the project. And I thought that was very interesting because when you compare those two documents, the UK, the UK one definitely seems more like a legal contract, and the Penn State one seems to be more of a hands-on, your project team is manipulating and working through it. So when we get to the legal side, I'm going to be talking about this contract appendix. So in North America, in Canada specifically, we've built a BIM contract appendix that's added on to a normal contract. And when you see that, it's very UK-like. But then it adds little reference points that then call out this execution plan to be applied at the project level. So I thought that was interesting that was called out there. And this one here, this is what I thought. I like this piece here. So the UK's focus and discussion on defining object naming. So for me, objects are very important. And when I teach, when I talk to clients, and I think in a couple of weeks, I can't remember. No, yeah, in a couple of weeks, I talk about how, we talk about these assemblies of models that come together so we can do design review, so we can pull things together. But ideally, that's great for design review, for visualization, for all of these pieces. But then at some point, we step right back and go right down to the component level. So when you talk about fabrication, procurement, asset management, some of these other BIM uses, very important uses. If I talk about asset management, I'll always say, I look around the space, I see walls, I see paint, I see everything. That's all good. I see my space, I see my ability to get out of here. But if I'm asset managing a component and I'm looking at a light fixture or a specific part of a window, an IoT device, I have a glass break sensor I'm looking at right now. That's all at the component level. And when I'm managing that component, I know it's inside a space and everything, but at some point I need to isolate right back down to that component level. So what is the object, the name, etc. And then I'll show you my version of an LOD matrix that actually gets right into component classification and understanding. So very important. So I thought that was pretty cool. So kudos to those who posted those. What I'm going to do now, so I'll go through the PowerPoint, and then we'll see where the dialogue goes. And I have open here the LOD matrix, and I might jump back and forth to these execution plans as well. So BIM execution plans. Let me pass this out of the way. Okay, this, again, I like this graphic, so important for me. This is what we're talking about. And as you've pointed out in the comparison, sometimes in the North America, they jump straight to here, not even with pre or post. It's just grab that BIM execution plan document, start filling out the sections. And that is a huge, huge mistake, okay? Now, in North America, so if you end up working here in Canada, oftentimes you're going to be told, go write a BXP, and can you just do it quickly? Just go do it. Off you go. and just have the confidence to point back and say, what about all this? Especially these first two, especially that first one. It may be verbal. So that document you worked on last week, filling out all those questions and everything, you might, and I've seen this. Can I go talk to the client and ask these questions? The answer is no. And you sit back, well, that doesn't even make sense. So press to get those questions answered. If you don't have the audience, if you can't hand the document, maybe it's a verbal dialogue with the project manager, with discipline leads, with whomever. Somebody has to give insight on those questions for the EIR so that you can actually answer the rest. When you're in a firm, these capability assessments, you might do it one time, and that might inform the next 15, 20 BXPs, right? So if I do an IT assessment of IBI Group, great. Once I've done it, it's not really going to change in the next 2, 3, 4 months. If there's something to be improved, I'll press for that, but I don't have to do that IT assessment every single time. But if for some reason on a project I'm working with a new subconsultant, I want to hand them that assessment and just find out what they're about. Do they have good internet connections? Do they have cloud connectivity? Do they know what BIM 360 is? From a BIM assessment, do they know what Revit is? Do they know what Civil 3D is? Do they know how these tools potentially talk? Ask those questions. Do they have a point of contact for you? Do they have a team? Very important. The team. So what does that mean? How do you do anything BIM if you don't have the right people? So I start with this because oftentimes the trap, so we started this course with BIM myths. So the biggest myth, BIM is equal to Revit. So what's the biggest trap when planning BIM? Oh, I know what to do. Press that Revit icon. Now Revit is open. How do I plan BIM? Okay, grab that template, start jamming in families. Yeah, that's great. You technically know how to use Revit. That's awesome, but you didn't plan the BIM, right? And you'll notice often, a lot of times when I do this, it's breaking that mold and stepping back. Yeah, when I hire a BIM coordinator, obviously if they come in and say, I've never heard of Revit and I don't know how to use it, that'll be challenging, right? But believe it or not, that person could still be hireable, although it would be more challenging because they'd have to get a massive training influx, like a blitz of Revit, right? And that's why I like that you actually learn workflows and tools and procedures. But notice in those classes, it's Revit and Navisworks, and I think we have BIMTrack, and I think DeRufus is in the course. Solibri is mentioned. So you get a little bit of all these things, and you get BIM 360 because you're actually getting the tool. You're getting part of a tool set, not the entire tool set, but you're getting part of the tool set that will make you powerful when you're working. I'm not sure if we show you BIM Civil 3D, and I'm not sure if we show you anything Bentley, because there's only so much a college can do, right? That's why I stress Bentley. Bentley is out there, and if you go into Europe, ArchiCAD and Immense Check tools, all there. And we'll talk about that next week for sure. What's the experience? So back to the IT assessment. So first, okay, so how complicated is that project? Am I doing a house? I'm in a 1,200 square foot semi-detached house. Very tiny, a joined wall. I could probably BIM this thing pretty quickly. Probably could. I'm shocked in 20 years that I haven't, and I don't know why. I've BIMmed so much, but I haven't BIMmed my house. But how complicated is it? Is it a school? Is it a hospital? And if it's a hospital, you have to understand. You may not know mechanical engineering. You just have to understand that the collection of assets in that hospital is profusely immense, and it all has to work together. The space between the finished ceiling and the underside of structure will be loaded with stuff that has to be coordinated, and then it's going to be managed. And all of those important apparatuses have to all be tracked, because if I'm in the OR and I turn on something and it doesn't turn on, it could be life-changing or catastrophic, okay? Is it a transit station or a transit hub? or rail lines. So rail lines, and one of the sample projects in week 5 are a rail line. And imagine the rail line. I have the building and I'm building all this stuff, but it's all dependent on this train. I change that alignment in any way, right? Twist, turn, whatever. The entire building responds, period. It has no choice. It will respond. And it's driven by the rail. Water, wastewater treatment plants or heavy industrial. So I have sample project of those as well. Driven by the process, driven by the hydraulics of the flow of whatever's flying through those pipes. That's what it is. When I started at CH2M Hill, a piping designer came to me and said, you know, my pipes are the most important. You're just making a pretty building to hide the pipe. And I said, man, I hope I'm doing a little more than that. But that was and I knew they were the driving factor. The experience level. What do they know? So do you have a project where you've defined the software and nobody knows the software? Okay, so the obvious example, it's a Revit project and nobody's used Revit. Or it's a Revit project and they're trying to use Revit like they do AutoCAD, which unfortunately is still in our industry. Or as you'll see in week 5, I'm not trying to scare you about week 5, but you'll see in week 5, it's one of those sample projects I've posted, and there's 3 or 4 different softwares, and nobody knows how to make them work together. So the simple example, I have a building sitting on a site. That's what every single project. So where's all my site information? In the BIM world, it's in Civil 3D. Nobody knows how to link something properly, how to publish and share coordinates, how to geolocate the model. Therefore, all the assets inside the model, they don't know where they are in the world. And I want to go and do something augmented reality standing on site with my phone. Well, I can't. There's nothing connected. How are we setting things up? Who are the BIM leads in the studios or the office? Studio is a UK term, but studios or offices. If I'm working with 5 sub-consultants, who are you working with? Who's your person? You'll have chaos if you don't have a team, right? And again, these aren't dedicated people. I oftentimes, when you present this at the start of a project, somebody will say, I can't afford a person sitting around just talking about BIM. Good, well, don't, but who is the person talking about BIM in your 5-person firm, in your 10-person firm, in your 100,000-person firm? Who's the person on the project? And then you just look these people in the face with sheer and utter confidence and directness. I am the BIM lead. Who am I talking to on the project from your firm about BIM? And once you have the name, that's your team. And it's so important. Deliverable requirements. So what does the client want? If nobody knows, am I delivering the Revit model? Am I delivering AutoCAD? Am I delivering MicroStation? Am I delivering PDFs? Layered PDFs or flat PDFs? Am I delivering who knows what? You'll see in week 7. There's a lot of stuff that could be. What other applications? So we're using Revit, great. Are we comparing PDF sheets on Bluebeam Studio? Are we using the full breadth of BIM 360? And I'm a BIM 360 fan. I love it. BIM 360 is great. But are we using ProjectWise? And I'll introduce you all to that. I've also used ProjectWise for the last decade and a half. BIM 360 is just 4 years old. ProjectWise is about 15 years old. So if you're sitting there saying, what is ProjectWise? Go on, Google it. It's good, but we'll talk about it in a couple of weeks for sure. Quality assurance forms, right? Is it a BIM project? And that's an interesting question. So I was face-to-face with a partner yesterday of a different firm. And he said to me, so at IBI Group, how did he put it? How many full, true BIM projects have you actually done? And I looked at him and I said, well, what do you think is a full, true BIM project? And he laughed. And I said, well, I just mean all the consultants working together. Okay, well, that's a whole different concept than a full, quote, BIM project from my perspective. But is it BIM? Do you have the entire supply chain of your project in design working in your model? And if so, how is it to be managed? Who's doing clashes? Who's talking about the clashes? How are they being resolved? All important questions. And of course, the EIR. So you have a team, tasks, communicate. Oftentimes when we use Revit, this concept of a splash screen, when you open up the Revit model, force it on the welcome to the project screen. It's very easy to do. And in there you have all your information and use that as a communication mechanism. Identify issues and needs. Working on this Hurontario LRT project, teams from Toronto, Italy, which I would love to go visit them there, but haven't yet. A team in the UK, and yeah, and that encompasses 6 different firms. And this is the type of project where the station is being done in Revit, the little stops are being done in Bentley, and then all of the civil linear is in Bentley's OpenRoads. So because of that, there's a whole host of questions about training, about making sure people know the protocols. Question, Project View and MS Project. No, I was mentioning Project Wise. So Bentley Project Wise is a collaboration system that I'll talk about in week 5. MS Project is a scheduling tool. That was just one of the questions in the chat there. But yeah, so this project we're working on, issues and needs. We're using tools that people have never used before. So maybe you need content to be created. No different than I need a Revit family. Well, I need an OpenRoads culvert. I need an alignment to be built. I need a pipe network. And as BIM coordinators, if you're sitting there saying, oh goodness, I've never done anything of what you're talking about, that's okay. That's all good. But you'll be on a team where people will be asking you for things. And part of the role of what I keep referring to as a BIM lead. So in the industry, BIM managers, BIM coordinators, all of these terms that we'll see, I can't remember which presentation I talk about them all. The most important part is the lead aspect, leading a group of people. So you may not know, if I said to you right now today, can you go into OpenRoads? Or no, if I said to you, I need you to create me a pipe network in Bentley OpenRoads. You can say to me, we'll get on it. That's all I need. And then you lead the effort to do that. You may have never opened OpenRoads in your life, but you're the lead to achieve it. That's the important part. I'm not a Revit expert. I can get in Revit. I can do some awesome things. If somebody said to me, I need a family, we have a team of content creators and we have consistency. You want me to make you a family? I can make you a Revit family. I'm sure it won't be the best, but I can do it. But we have people that'll do it better. And that's what's important, to harness expertise, to orchestrate, to communicate. That's why in week 14, you're all presenting to me. You're all going to communicate, and it's going to be fun. I'm going to like it. You're all going to enjoy it. For those of you with your cameras on, you'll love it. Don't be afraid of presenting. It'll be amazing. Everybody turn on your cameras, man. I don't see it. I only see a couple faces. Cameras are the best. Company standards, right? That's an important thing for us because I'll tell you something. I am so tired of the dialogue around how is a door swing? Does this door open with a 90-degree swing? Do you show it at a 45-degree swing? As an architect, I'll tell you, I don't care. Show the door. It'll have a swing. But just do it consistently across the project. And when you work in a company, let's never have this dialogue again. You make the door, it has the family, it has the 2D swing, so it shows up in plan, and it does it consistently across every single project we do, no dialogue. Thickness of walls when they're shown in plan and section, I don't care, just consistent. And luckily, we have the National CAD standard, so it spells all this stuff out. Just use it. And luckily, Revit, ArchiCAD, Vectorworks, all of these tools are already pre-populated with National CAD standards. So we should never ask this question ever again. Just use the standards. Company standards, I'll say, probably a lot more important when it comes to design standards. So if there's ways or mechanisms of how we design as a firm, as an industry, build that in. And that all comes to BIM is not this isolated thing that happens in the corner of the office. It's an integrated thing. So whatever we're doing in the model to design all of these things you're seeing in these images, it's all in cohort with a design team. So you're inbred, you're in there. You're not a sideshow. BIM is not the sideshow. Revit warnings. I don't know why people are afraid of them. If Revit says, hey, you know what? This wall is not touching this ceiling. Why don't you make the wall touch the ceiling? Why don't you just fix it? Just make it right. Because guess what? When you start a model, I'm pretty sure there's 0 warnings. If there's warnings in the template, we have issues. So your template has no warnings. That's great. So when you start modeling and you start creating warnings, address the warnings. Make sure that your model is as clean and robust as possible, and then we have a good thing going forward. All right. This is very important. So this actually comes from the BIM practice manual, which I think is one of the recommended readings. I don't know if it's required in any of the other courses, but it's a good book. I wrote a chapter of it, so I think that chapter is awesome, but it is a very good book. This diagram, I love it. When I was at CH2M, I'm talking a decade ago, I would walk around and wonder, why do people not care? And I'd look at them and say, what are you fighting? You know, the world is digital, the world is technology, the world of what was done 30 years ago is just gone. And I used to say, okay, you know what? I've got people that are BIM savvy. I've got people that are BIM aware. And then unfortunately, 5-10 years ago, I had a lot of people that were BIM don't care. And the BIM don't care people, I said, I can't deal with these people right now. We had to progress. So we were doing some major project work. I was coming off the London Olympics. I needed people that could actually press things forward. The BIM don't care. They were a large cohort, but they were manageable. So I was able to focus and do phenomenal things. And then I saw this diagram in the contract, in the BIM appendix, in the BIM practice manual. Thought, how great is this? So the mission here, to turn the BIM don't care, and hopefully, and I'm glad it's not on the pyramid, because maybe it's just a small little collection of people. It's got to be small. There cannot be, like, the BIM don't care population in our industry today has got to be smaller and smaller, or it's just slowly disappearing. That's why we have this course. That's why you're all here. Our role is to make sure that all staff are aware. And the ones that don't care are the ones that are still trying to not care. At the bare minimum, they have to be aware, because they have to be aware of something in order to not care about it. So that's a good thing, hopefully. But the mission of the entire BIM industry really is to bring awareness to all staff at all levels within all of our firms. Be aware of what BIM is. Be aware of this process. Be aware of how it complements and works with the design process. And I'll argue, and I just had this discussion yesterday, when some of my BIM coordinators are not engaged properly by project managers, you know, it's bad management. And you look around and you say, okay, look, if I'm going to design a building, I know that if I'm designing space, I need an architect. If there's going to be columns and beams, I need an engineer, a structural engineer. If there's going to be duct work or electrical work, I know the engineers I'm going to need. So there's this ingrained understanding that architectural, structural, and MEP are in a building. Well, great. Then I say, well, what about civil? Oh, yeah, you know, the building's on a site. Okay, I'm going to need civil. I say, okay, great. What about BIM? And you just silence. Well, what did you do 20 years ago when you were on CAD? Who was the CAD manager? Silence. So then I say, well, what if just say there's got to be a person to manage technology for you? Dead silence. So those are those managers that are not understanding. On the flip side, and on the happier side, there's a lot of project managers that know that there is something to this, and they demand engagement from the very beginning. And that makes me so happy. You call me at the start of a project, I'm there for you, it's all good. So this pyramid, everybody here, all of us, this is what we are here to become, okay? You graduate this course, you become a BIM coordinator, you get teamed up with a senior BIM coordinator, your capabilities grow, you're the specialist. Now, I stress, this is BIM leadership. So you're gonna have a specialty, but you're gonna be an overall specialist. So your role is not the one that builds all the families, knows every single software inside out, and just does everything. You're aware of all of it. You're a specialist in the entire BIM process, the BIM process, not an expert in Revit. This is what I mean here. You're a specialist in the BIM process. If you're also a Revit expert, rock on. If you're an EcoSim expert, excellent. If you're an ArchiCAD expert, great. If you know how to write piping specs for OpenPlan, awesome. But you're a specialist in the BIM process, okay? And that's, you know, let that resonate over the next 10 weeks as well as we're still together. This is what I mean when I say this. When I say BIM leads, BIM champions, this is what I mean. The next level down are experts. And these are where you'll have team leaders. So you'll have, what's in it? Like, so on a project team, I have the one person that can write Grasshopper scripts and thus is the best for that project team in conceptual design. Doing parametric analysis, away they go. I have there's other ones that are really good at developing wall types inside Revit and where to use them and why. Really good at the development of deliverables through Revit, making sure the sheets are looking good. Good at developing content, but they're usually at the team level. You can be one of those too, depending on how you balance your time, okay? Then the functional user. This is everybody on that project. All have to be able to get into the model, understand it, interpret it, design by it, etc. The functional user. They oftentimes they'll say, I don't know how to build it, I just know how to harness it. Excellent. Where that fails is when I have some functional users that are just petrified of Revit, completely petrified. So what do? They'll say, fine, I can't fight Revit anymore. Just, you know, give me an AutoCAD expert. I'll look at it in export. I'll look at it in AutoCAD, and then I'll give you feedback and you can put it back into Revit. And I shake my head. I'm like, what are you doing? Why would you do that? And some of my BIM coordinators, I say, just show them how to look at the sheet in Revit. Because these are the ones, they're not comfortable in 3D. So they think Revit's just the model. I don't know what to do. Well, just open the sheet. Oh, I don't know how to look at the project browser. Well, can't we teach you that? Yeah, I guess so. And then we teach them, they're looking at their sheets, and we teach them, look, don't press delete. Don't delete and sync. Don't do stupid things. Just look at the content. Oh, I could do that. Okay. And then you walk away thinking, that was, you know, I didn't teach them anything special, but I made them functionally able to manipulate and see the project. And then the awareness. Corporate leadership, group leadership, partners, senior associates, spec writers, detail creators, all of these people have to be aware. This is the process. And I mentioned spec writers specifically. We'll talk about specifications later on. But if you're not, I don't know if, let me assume you're not familiar with what a spec is very quickly. When we in the legal deliverables here in Ontario, well, in Canada, specifications take primary importance, drawings are secondary. And that's something that not a lot of people can really grasp. So a spec basically is, if I have my drawing, a floor plan, I have a door. It'll have a door number, and that's it. The spec will say that that door is an aluminum door, a wood door, hollow metal door, whatever it is, and it'll give me all the particulars about what the door is, so the product, how to execute the deliverable, and the warranty and the requirements for it. And that spec is what will help to get that door delivered and produced. My drawing, well, the door will also have hardware on it. It'll just say, I need a push device. So if you notice in Algonquin, you go to the stairwell, you have that push device. It can't be locked. There might be a window, a little vision panel, so you don't push the door open to someone coming down the stairs, etc. That's in my design. My spec is going to say the glass has to be wired glass and only so big, or else it doesn't meet code. The push-pull device is going to be made by this manufacturer and have this pressure on the push. All that stuff, that's all in a spec. And these things work in tandem. So the spec writers, they're sitting there in the corner having all their spec knowledge. I'm in my model having all the design. They all got to tie together. And of course, in the world of BIM, they actually could automate together, and we'll talk about that. That's our aware stuff. This diagram, this chart matrix also does come from the practice manual. And what's pretty cool here is, as a BIM lead, I would ask you, where do you fall? And what I love about this is it's defined so many different possibilities. So my role, so I'm Global Director of Design Technology. I'm basically the first one, sometimes the second one, definitely these ones down here. So I do a lot of strategic. And then I built a team to address management of a project. And then I coordinate with project teams for the production. So notice here, BIM modeler, very simple. And you notice a lot of LinkedIn people, I'm an architectural BIM modeler or a BIM engineer. Like what's a BIM engineer, right? And I go and I meet these people, oh, what are you talking about? Well, I use BIM in my engineering. All right, cool. So you model, okay. You know, those are the dialogues. So you got to siphon through all that, because I can only tell you, you can only imagine the resumes that come my way. So those are what modelers are. So going back to here, a modeler, we're talking this functional user. That's the person that's building the model, ensuring the drawings are being made, because we still have to produce drawings. BIM coordinators at the project level, they're there doing that model coordination, sometimes helping with modeling as well. I have a lot of people that are fulfilling just this role alone. They're in there inbred at the project level. But then I also get them to do some of these higher functions, going all the way up to the top here, okay? And when you look along here, oftentimes I'll say, I need to assign a project BIM lead. And I'll be asked, well, what's the role of this BIM lead? Because a lot of times people are thinking, are you going to give me someone to help make the model? And I'll say, no, you want modelers? We need to hire designers that are model capable, period. If you're hiring an architectural designer that only knows how to do AutoCAD, why are you doing that? And that dialogue I have with our teams all across IBI, I did that all across CH2M Hill. When I say I'm assigning a project BIM lead, I want that person to develop the BIM execution plan, help set up the model, audit, help create content. Now, help, coordinate, lead. That's the critical thing. So they have a role to play in all of this, leading. I don't need the BIM lead to build all the content, etc. They might not even do the hands-on model setup, but they're there coordinating it, ensuring that we're sharing coordinates with civil and building, aligning all that stuff, most likely writing the BIM execution plan, grabbing that template, harnessing it, influencing staffing. So if you notice project staffing, we have project manager in there. So I'm most likely not going to staff a project, but I'm going to say, why did you staff that person on the project? I told you it's a Revit project. I told you the deliverable is this, and you staffed a MicroStation person. Why would you do that? And have that dialogue. Model coordination, notice we double put here. There's a role for the project manager and for a BIM lead in coordinating that model. And the reason is, I find a clash. What do I do with it? Architect, Engineer, you've got a beam going through a window. What do you do with that? Well, it's, quote, simple. Either the window moves or the beam moves. Fix it, guys. And what happens? Nobody fixes it. Nobody wants. I'm not moving my window because the facade has to look and give you all the architectural rubbish. And structural will say, well, I can't move the beam because it's calculated, it's fixed there, whatever reasons they would give. Well, guess what? The project manager has to get in there and fix it because you can't have a beam going through a window, plain and simple. So, and then there's this part here. So this is my role as well. Very important role. I'm in a 2,500 person firm. So I can play this role and I can hire people to do this role. If you're in a much smaller firm, the one person might be doing all of this, all management and strategic. So keep that in mind. It's good to have the dialogue though, to say, look, all of these things are possible. If you go into an interview and it's about a bit, the rec is out for a BIM coordinator, look at the description. And I'm very explicit. When I was hired, when I saw my job posting, it had a whole host of these strategic items in place. When I put a rec out on LinkedIn for a BIM coordinator, you'll see mostly these management ones. And then when our teams put on postings for a designer, I make sure HR includes elements of those too. And that's how we distinguish. So we're going to have modelers that are being hired by structural teams, mechanical teams, electrical or architectural or civil. That's their realm. I want to influence it, but that's for them. My hiring in BIM leads is really here. And then I govern in this area. And notice, I do engage my BIM champions. So usually my senior BIM leads that are on my team, I sit with them and I say, look, corporately, we're going to do this, 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 and this. Does it make sense? Would you be comfortable in anything I'm doing here to bring it forth on a project here? And that's important. So if I go off doing research and development on something and you say to me, Brent, that makes no sense and why would you do that? I'd stop and think, right? So one of my R&Ds, for example, my strategics, is automated code review. I want to be able to look at the model and automatically run a code review of the model. I think that's great. And I sit with my BIM champion saying, you know, would you be comfortable to deploy it? And if we have this synergy, away we go. So look for that in the future. We're going to be running code against our models. I keep referencing the UK's BS 1192, now ISO 19659. It's a very important ISO standard. And just this is one diagram they showed about roles. And I just used that to say, look, even in the UK, in all their complexity, they have a delineation like this as well. It's all semantics. They call it task information manager and interface manager. And you say, what the hell is that? And I'll say, well, you know, once you siphon through the UK nomenclature, the interface manager is a person that manages the interactions of all the disciplines. When architectural and structural come together, mechanical and electrical, mechanical and structural, there's all that interface between all of the parties. Somebody manages that. How do you collaborate? How do you coordinate? How do you manage clashes? How do you manage change? And then task information manager is the person managing the deliverable outputs, the data drops, and all of the deliverables that are required from the specific parties. For me, it's one and the same. We combine that in IBI. I don't like that delineation, but it's there. And I said, all right, it's there. You rock with it. Oh, here's my semantic slide. I forgot. Here it is. So this is the role. So if you say to me, so Brent, do I apply for a BIM lead, whatever lead? I shake my head and I say, look, if the word BIM, digital, whatever is in there, coming out of this course, you'll probably be able to apply. And the reason, I'll tell you, on projects, so my role, it doesn't even matter, I'm director of design technology, great. On projects, I have been these top three, And notice how it's CAD with the second D, computer-aided drafting and design. So they would say, well, we're saying design, and if you design in 3D, it encompasses BIM, so you're the CAD lead. And I just say, ew, but okay. I'm not going to argue. They accept it. But I'm seeing those top three used less and less, thank goodness. I've been these two. I've been modeling lead. I've been modeling coordinator. On the London Olympics, I was the digital design coordinator. Thought that was pretty cool. 10 years ago, now it's whatever. I've been design technology lead. I have never been Revit coordinator, ever. So that's cool, but that's a big role too. You'll see that. I have been the IT lead. And I'd say, I'm not an IT lead. That's disgusting. They go, no, that's what we're calling information technology, but it causes actual confusion with what actual IT is. But at the project level, my view has been, I'm not going to fight nomenclature. I'll say, call me the digital design coordinator. I walked around London on the Olympics and I called myself the BIM lead, whatever. I'll use both. I'll use them interchangeably. Somebody will come to me and say, I need a drafting lead. And I'll say, do you mean a BIM lead? What do you mean? And we just have those dialogues. It's all good. All this stuff applies. It's okay. Now, all of this stuff is good. And if you from my perspective, I couldn't care less. This stuff is way more important. So you are one of these, okay? Whatever you are. You must work with all of these. So the project manager, if the BIM lead is not working with the project manager, you fail, plain and simple. Every project has a project manager. Now, every project may or may not have any one of these that follow. So and I've seen this, basically this is about scalability. Remember scope, schedule, budget, it applies to these roles as well. So at the end of the day, I always say this, if the project manager of one person did everything on the project, great. So the project manager is architect, engineer, designer, spec writer, BIM lead, and all these roles, fine. Obviously, that's impossible for one person to do. So a project manager has no problem having an architect and a bunch of engineers because they're the ones that carry stamps and all the legal stuff and all that good stuff. As projects get bigger, these roles start to introduce themselves. So I was on Eglinton Crosstown, $12.5 billion light rail transit going across Toronto. Going to be open next year or the year after. Very exciting. They had a design/engineering manager. So the project manager was the one that interacted with the client and the sponsors and the investors, did all the public engagements, the one who gets yelled at for being over budget, all that good stuff. That's the project manager. Then the design manager, engineering manager, worked with all the teams. Design coordination, so all of the architects and engineering teams and task breakdown, scheduling, all the coordination. And that was good. It was a good delineation. From a BIM lead perspective, on that project, we engaged a little more with this role than with this role, but I did have interaction with the project manager as well. Some of these other ones, if you hear or see a document controls manager, this is somebody that deals with all of your transmittals and submittals. So you have your Revit model, you've got 100 sheets in your Revit model. Great. On the first deliverable, 10 of those sheets, PDF and deliver. 2 weeks later, the next 30 deliver. 3 weeks later, all 50 get out. 8 weeks later, all 100 get delivered. Well, great. Now you're sending those things out over. One sheet in Revit might have been already delivered 4 times. Another sheet in Revit, just 1 time. And you're getting reviews and comments and feedback coming in. And you have to track them and resolve them. And all this stuff is happening. And you're sitting there in that model having to do it all. And you're accountable for that change. And you're feeding back and forth. And then this document controls manager is trying to make sure all these digital waves are connected because all this data is important. When we deliver that model, it's influenced by all that data. Project controls looks at scheduling, costing, task breakdown, etc. So there, you want to do schedule simulation as a BIM goal. Well, there's your person. There's your schedule. He's going to have something in P6 or project, Microsoft Project or something like that. There's my connection point. Project accountant, my link to financials. How much time are we spending on a project? And then project accounting can also often link in with cost estimating if they're at the project level. So bringing my material data out and connecting to a financial system at the client level. Possible. And then the quality manager would ensure the quality of the project, the deliverables, ensure the quality of the information. So you work very closely with a quality manager when you're delivering that content. Now that's a major project. On minor projects, and I shouldn't say minor, on much smaller projects, oftentimes those 5 roles I just talked about don't exist. So where are they? They're sucked up into the project manager, or they're delegated to somebody else. They all happen. So when I talk scope, schedule, budget, the scope of those 5 roles are on every single project, period. No dispute. Anybody wants to dispute that in the industry, I'm here to dispute it with. It's all good. This stuff happens. When I used to do house designs 20 years ago, I'd be working for just a sole proprietor architect. We did all this stuff, just scaled down to the scope of a single family house. So what happens as a BIM lead? Well, you're working with a lot of digital data. This is a lot of digital stuff. They might try to press it onto you, and that's okay. You make it work. So just be aware, on large projects, there's this infusion of all of this. On small projects or in smaller firms, you might be asked, so how are we managing transmittals? And you say, I don't know. Let's figure it out. So what's the logical step? I have a Revit. I have BIM 360. BIM 360 is adding all these functionalities. Start to explore what those functionalities are. And then you'll say, oh, look at that. If I dump Revit in BIM 360, great, I'm sharing. If I press that publish button, oh, I can see Revit in BIM 360. I can manipulate the design. I can make comments. BIM 360 publishes all of my sheet files. I can distribute the sheet files. I can make comments. All this stuff can suddenly start to happen. The power of the cloud. And all of a sudden you're doing pieces of design review, doc management, project controls, and all this stuff just starts to flow. Very powerful stuff we have out there. Okay, I'm just trying to, I don't remember where I am. Where am I here? Okay, did a lot of talking today, man. That's cool. The BIM lead role. Every project has the role. In IBI group, I made this slide and I said, look, why don't we talk about simple versus complex? So I showed that wheel of BIM. Remember, I had the orange boxes for schedules and drawings, design review, and visualization. Simple, simple, simple. We just do that all the time. Or are we doing complex stuff? This will outline the type of person or people required for the BIM lead of an entire project. If I'm doing all this stuff, there's no way it's done by one person. There's no way one person knows how to do it all. It's just not possible. But it can be led and managed by one person, okay? If the project is just doing this, you know what? You as one BIM lead, you could have maybe 3 or 4 projects at one time doing just that. And that's the experience I've seen. When I was on Eglinton Crosstown, we had a bunch of these. When I was on the London Olympics, we had these and then more. So there was me and a bunch of people. When I'm doing the single family home, oh my God, give me 10 of those. That's fine. I can do 10 at one time and be the BIM lead for all of them. It's okay. So the concept of the BIM lead, again, you have the model. Typical design, ArcStruct, MEP Civil. Minimum, you'll have these. Minimum. You tell me, you show me any building in this world that doesn't have these disciplines. I'd be curious. Even the prefab buildings. Just a side note with the whole the coronavirus. When they showed, I don't know if you've seen CBC News, they're building that hospital in 5 days. I don't know if you saw that, and how phenomenal. Like they're actually showing the time lapse, how they're clearing the site. The hospital will go up in 5 days. It'll be functional to an extent. All of that has ArcStruct MEP Civil, and Civil is huge right now, coordinating all that removal 24-hour around the clock. Prefab structures will be dropped in place. So the Arc and the Struck, it's all done in a factory. Great, but it's still Arc and Struck. And what do you think's woven in between all of that? All of the mechanical, electrical, and MEP. They'll all come together. They'll connect. This complex will be built. And it sounds silly. Plug it into the utility. Boom, you're done. Conceptually simple, but conceptually all of these. So I digress, of course. A lot of talking today. All these disciplines will usually have a lead and a designer. That's your typical structure. An architect and the design team, an engineer and their design team, okay? Wrapped around this is your project manager, your design manager, your engineering manager, your quality manager, cost controls, all those other roles. And then looking at this technological foundation, you've got the awesome, and that's us. We are the awesome people, okay? And now, I'm not going to say we're the most important role of the project, but how could we not be, right? How could we not be the most important role in that project? Because if it's not for this role, I'd say, well, great, let's just procure drafting boards, buy the pencils and the paper, and we're right back to where we were. And when you look at the world of AutoCAD, great, we digitized Mylar and pens. Good for us. That's all we were doing in the 90s, the late 80s, the 90s. And then this 3D stuff started, and it was so good. So happy where we are today. So the concept, when I describe it, I say, look, think of the BIM lead role like you do any other discipline. It's a discipline lead role. As a discipline lead, and that's why I'm stressing, it's not all on you, okay? It's on you, your team, and your aligned team. Okay, so what do I mean by that? All those modelers, all those functional BIM users. So who's doing the Civil model, the ARC model, the Struck model, etc. So not only who's doing it, is their lead playing? Do they understand? Are they properly aware? Are they doing things connected to the process, or are they being a hindrance? Then, is it a simple BIM or a complex BIM? If it's simple, maybe it's just you and the aligned staff. If it's complex, it's you and your team. On this Here Ontario project, we keep saying it's like I have a BIM committee assigned to the project. But I kept saying, because somebody just quit IBI, very disappointed, but it's all good. So because he quit, I'm now looking at the rest of the team, and I've got a new hire starting. So I said, we're going to have 5 people on this project. Who's the lead? And I'm looking at them all. Who is going to be that point of accountability? That's the question. Then the rest are all there. So that point of accountability, you need to be a little thick-skinned. You're going to get yelled at from a project manager. You're going to get complimented from a project manager. You're going to have discipline leads that say, you're ruining my life. And then in the same breath, they're going to say to you, this is so amazing. You're going to say this, you're going to hear Revit is so hard. I used to sketch on a piece of paper and things were so easy. And then you're going to hear, my client was so impressed. We sat him down, we put that goggle on his face, and he was in the design. And he said that this was just technologically amazing. And then you're going to walk away on the weekend and say, what a weird week. I'm awesome, I suck. I'm awesome, I suck. Is that really what it's about? Sometimes it is. But at the end of the day, the net result, I'm awesome. And that's what it's going to be. That will be the net result. But you'll have ups and downs of insanity. So, wow, I finally got to the BIM execution plan. Okay, I promise I will go faster here. So the execution plan itself, okay? Scope, schedule, budget. If you say to me, again, what's your takeaway? What are you BIMing? Why are you BIMing it? And is it all being done with respect to scope, schedule, budget? That's the BIM execution plan, okay? We can stop this dialogue now if you just remember that. There's the 2 templates. You've seen the 2 templates. I'm not particular to any one. The main mission, state your goals, and then state which uses will be harnessed to achieve the goal. I want perfectly coordinated drawings. So I'm going to harness design review, design authorship, maybe probably visualization, and that could be it, and I'll achieve it. I want to optimize steel fabrication. So I'm going to harness design authorship, fabrication, and then could be just those 2. Maybe some existing conditions modeling to make sure we know where it's going to be fabricated and then delivered precisely, and away you go. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's a recipe. Remember the cookbook, right? I make the goal. What's my recipe of uses to achieve it? And I hate when people say it's just a CAD project, so I think that's rubbish. You'll always hear scope, schedule, budget, quality, risk. And I say that because I'm a scope, schedule, budget guy, and that's you'll walk away at the end of this term saying, my goodness, he said that every week. How annoying is he? But it is what it is. But when you're working with project managers, you'll hear, and it always, when something goes wrong, okay? So Revit model crashes, okay? Revit model crashes. What's the solution? Grab a backup, fix it, move forward. It's not complicated. It is what it is. But what you'll hear, I can't make my deliverable schedule. Oh my God, we're wasting time, budget. Oh my God, now I can't do my work, scope. Oh my God, we're going to miss a deliverable and have to pay a financial penalty, risk. You'll always hear something woven around those 5 words because those are project management triggers, okay? And at the end of the day, it's, yeah, it's back up. Don't worry, it's all good. Oh, okay, great. You guys are amazing. Oh, the BIM coordinators are the best. And they walk away. And you sit there and you look and say, well, wait a minute, it was catastrophic 10 minutes ago, and now it's cool. And that's the nature of design. And that's just not BIM. I hear that across all aspects of design projects in the industry. It's fun. Welcome to the industry. It is. I've been in it 20 years, man. It is great. Talked about the EIR, so I'm not going to beleaguer this, but what are we doing, right? That was the whole point of last week. Define the needs, define the deliverable needs, define the intent in the mind of that client. And if we're on a design build project, the client is the contractor, the client is also the ultimate client. Makes for a much more intriguing EIR from the perspective of a design firm, okay? Assess our capabilities. So CPICS gave us these 3 forms. I love these 3 forms. So I DUK'd them and they're available for us to use. So important. What's our BIM competence? What's our maturity from a perspective of IT? And what's our internal resource capabilities? And important, it's not just me. I'm making a model. It's not just what my capability is, because as I said, you show me one project that doesn't have multiple disciplines. You might be within one firm, which is great. IBI Group, we have building engineering and civil engineering housed within IBI Group. So when the project is 100% IBI, it's a little easier. I know our IT assessment. I know our BIM assessment. Usually I just have to deal with resources. When I have externals, all of these questions must be answered. So North America, shepherded by Penn State. Okay, they have their thing. Again, they keep playing with their links, as you guys point out. So, but the site's good. It's there. This is your typical, this is the default table of contents for the North American BIM execution plan. What I've done, what I like to do is to try to automate things like section B and C. So, when you get into it and when you see it, fill out your project information. Well, you know what, when you're in a firm, project name, project manager, project address, all that stuff is already somewhere. The reason it's in here is because oftentimes they'll say, if you're not having the proper dialogue with a project manager, with an extended project team, here's the information to give to all of those working on the project. As whomever pointed out in the discussion board, this is on the project, in the inner workings of the project. But my view, this project information exists. I want to push a button and populate the BXP. And that's very feasible, very possible. Goals and uses. So what are my goals? What are my uses? Who are the people on the project? I'll look at some process maps in a bit. Exchange of information, my data drops. What am I exchanging? So therefore, what are my deliverables? Are there any FM requirements? Again, EIR, owner, any idea? Owner's response, I don't know, I don't care. Section H is empty. Water, wastewater treatment plant, well, you'll have a lot of stuff in Section H. How are we sharing? BIM 360, project-wise, Office 365, combination, you'll have combinations. We'll talk about hybrid projects, week 5. Very fun. Yeah, model structure. So you can see UK divides it to pre and post. That's one of the biggest differences. And what I like about that is it actually lays a framework prior to the execution of the contract. Whereas this one, it's let's all sign, yay, we won the project. Oh, you know what? We'll have a BXP. We'll agree on something. And then we all know what we're going to get paid, or we know the structure. And then we debate over what this should be. In the UK, it's let's set some foundations working with the owner. Usually the owner instigates the pre-contract BXP. Then let's sign everybody on board, fill out the missing details. So you can see here some important things, especially 2.2, 3.1. Why in any world would I want to sign into a project and not know the BIM goals and BIM uses? It would be terrible. And we do it in North America so many times. That's why we've built that BIM contract appendix to say, look, we may not have a pre-contract, but add this to your contract to ask some foundational questions, which you'll see in week 9. But the foundational questions are basically some of these right there. And if you have aspirations for something beyond design, let's just state that so there's no rubbish going forward. Then once you sign on, you get into the particulars, model structure, and all of these good things in Section 10 here. Expand upon collaboration procedures in Section 7. And define facility management. Is it COBie? Is it something else? When the information exchange, how it occurs. Some very important items here. The definition of what a BIM use is. Penn State goes into a lot of detail on this, which is great. Talks about different types of uses, whether, what their goals are, whether it's gathering information, generating, analyzing, communicating, or realizing, and then the secondary requirements underneath. So very, very cool things as it talks about what a use is, the purpose of a use, its characteristics, etc. And it provides us with these BIM use spreadsheets that are there as part of the template. So in that template there, when you look in this folder, and you're like, what is all this stuff? That's these BIM goals, use analysis, and then use worksheet. Get into these types of things over here. So, when it looks at BIM goals that are either one of these first 5, then it breaks it down, and then it kind of gives a definition of what it could be. And then we get into the LODs. Now, the most overused and overused and not understood thing in the BIM world. And it's scattered into contracts inappropriately. So remember last week I said, I'm going to deliver an LOD 300 model. My reply to that is never. I'm going to deliver, I want an LOD 400 model. You're not going to get it. And you should see the jaws drop when we have this dialogue. I'll say, absolutely not. Doesn't make sense, doesn't exist, never, 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 never. And everybody just, who brought this guy to the meeting? Why is he here, right? So these are the LOD definitions. The first thing I wanted to show is what I've added here. Design usually sequentially flows 100 to 300. Design, now remember, models are components. And they're components, okay? Last week I was talking about once I get to 300, I can then elevate the intelligence of the component to make it 500 ready, straight from my design model, okay? Construction, they would elevate it in a different way. This could happen, and I'm just thinking of a door. I could go from 100 to 300 during design. I could go into construction, have LOD 400 information, and then bring that into operations. But when I think of a concrete wall, pour joints and rebars and all these other things, I don't need to do that, okay? And that's just, keep that in mind. It's not a fixed, what I'm saying is not a cast in stone fact for every component, but I just say that because there are components that don't need to flow through all the LODs to be ops worthy. Switches and conduits. I don't need LOD 400 modeled conduits in order to have a valid LOD 500 switch. I need just, and think of the switch. And don't get confused with level of detail versus level of development. I can have an LOD 300 switch, which is a beautiful rectangle in Revit. That's it. I don't need to know, is it a Leviton switch? I don't need the detail of all the crap on the switch. Just need the switch. Then the information, model number, fabricator, it's a Leviton, it's going to be, or it's a Lutron connected to the Cassetta bridge that's going to give you IoT connectivity, and it's going to have a built-in sensor. Yeah, it's all great. Nothing to do with my Revit model. Nothing to do with the Revit model. All to do with information. So this is an LOD matrix. What somebody pointed out in the discussion, similar to the MIDP. Big difference, LOD versus the Master Information Delivery Plan. Big difference in name, very similar in concept. So this is the out-of-the-box one. I think I grabbed this from probably the LOD 5, the 2015 or 2016. It's all the same, right? They keep augmenting it. The 2020 spec should be out now. I'm gonna just show you my little baby here. So what I did with my BIM coordinators, it's twofold. I said I wanted to introduce in the matrix the classification systems. And they said to me, what? And we'll talk about that in one of the subsequent, I actually get into detail for the classification systems. And the reason I did that was to bring it down to the component level. Because BIM, remember, BIM is a collection of components. When it's all assembled, it's valuable. When it's all disassembled, it's also valuable for different purposes. So the gist of this, if I say to you, using Uniclass, a G18, G218 is a pad footing. An F139 is a rooftop structure. Okay, and depending on where you are in the world, there's a classification number. A G24 is going to be a sloped roof system. Okay, there's a number that corresponds to components. That lets you tie into other things like specs and estimating, etc. So when I first introduced this, my BIM coordinator said, Brent, why are you nuts? I said, I'm not nuts. Just, let's map these. So I asked each of them, take a system and take each one of these components and just write down the number. And when we put them all together, they said, oh, look at that puzzle piece. And then I say, you know what, is this too complex? If you don't want to see it, we'll just hide these. And then we're right back to what's delivered, okay? This is the crux of an LOD matrix. But for me, having this is just, it helps set the mentality for potential downstream items, okay? Now, let's talk about, you know what, let me actually hide them for now. So let's pretend I didn't do that. So I didn't drive you guys nuts with that. It's okay. So LOD matrix, components. What are all the components? Out of the box, superstructure, shell, these components will be there. So what was the first thing I did? I said, well, you don't have everything here. So we added interior components if we're doing special interior projects. We added services that were missing. So they had plumbing and HVAC, some conveying, fire protection. We added a lot more electrical, a lot more furnishing. Special construction, I think, was there. We added civil. Remember I said buildings don't float in the air. So we added all the civil, utilities, roadway. So I'm very proud of this LOD matrix, but that's cool. So you've got a whole host of stuff. Then here is the awesomeness. So we're going to do a footing to what level of development and when. Okay, schematic design is when. Discipline, LOD. Design development, discipline, LOD. And remember these phases. This was last week. I talked about schematic, design development, construction docs, and then as-built, 30, 60, 90, REBA 1 to 7. I don't care. You can formulate this to whatever phase. And the ultimate LOD matrix, I should actually have I should have all the phases here. Maybe I'll do that one day. So schematic design, 30%, or REBA, I think it's 1 to 3, schematic design. Then you go down. Each of these components you'll see will either be at 100 or not there. And that's important because if I'm doing a design build project, I want my contractor to know that in 30% design, there are certain things that won't be there. So here's one of my favorites, an argument over, I need to estimate the finishes. Why haven't you modeled? Wallboard, tiles in a massive transit project. Sure, not at 30%, estimate it. If a room is whatever, estimate it. At 60%, LOD 100. At 90%, we'll be at 300. And that sets the premise. So therefore, the validity of the data, of the estimate, of my material quantity, puts it into place. And then notice as built, oftentimes I'm saying just 300 as well. Because if I'm not doing something specific for asset management, from a design perspective, an as-built model, 300 is all we need. So keep that in mind too, a 300 as-built model, where I'll take components from the contractor, their as-built markups. I might even take a robust model with components at 400. So think of that. I'll take a contractor's Revit model that they've augmented from our own. They've added rebar and control joints. They've divided my wall into 100 pieces. They've simulated it. They've done the brick tiebacks. They've done all this wonderful stuff, and they shifted the door. What do I need to do? As built, I need to take my door and shift it. If all the other particulars from my 300 model components are intact, my 300 wall, I'm good. So that's the dialogue. And it's so important because when we get to legal and we talk about as built, it's very ambiguous unless it's explicitly stated in the contract who is doing it. If I'm the contractor doing it, maybe I set a bunch of these to 400 because they will already be at 400, maybe. But if I'm the designer doing it, I don't need to get all that rebar and pour joint and tie back and all those things to have something fit for as built that meets my legal requirement as an architect and or an engineer. And we'll talk about that later on. Yes, sir.
I was a bit confused on like a bit ambiguous on as you said, is it possible to have LOD 300 as built, means the drawings which I like the drawing which I modify after getting the red line markups, can they be LOD 300 still?
100% yes.
I see.
That's why in this matrix, that's why a lot of these we're starting with saying as built, the level of development of the components will still be at 300.
Right. All right.
And the reason for that is, so as an architect, I submit my design, I stamp it. when I need to do as-builts for my professional association, I need to update the things that are in my purview. So let's say I'm moving the door as the easiest example. You move the door, you affect travel distance a bit. We just need to make sure that it doesn't create any new code violations. So it's been reviewed. Somewhere during construction, there was transmission saying, yes, we approve it. The contractor moved the door a foot to the right or a meter to the right. His markup basically circles my door and says 1 meter over. When I go back into my Revit model, I'm moving the door. I didn't change the LOD of the door or the wall. I just moved the position of the door. Now that plan is as built.
Right.
That door is as built. I am confident I can stamp that, and I do that for every other change based on the markup. But the component, I don't have to add more level of development to that wall or that door to represent it in the as-built condition. And that's the myth, where
Yeah,
people will say automatically, well, if it's as-built, Brent, all of these have to be 500. Absolutely not.
the industry does this mistake quite often. That's why I was
It's
confused.
terrible. It's terrible. And they put it into contracts, which is terrible, terrible. I can't express. So.
And their stamps too.
Yeah, exactly. And if I go down, what I wanted to show here as well, some things will only be 200, even as built. So an example here, what do we got here? Office, vending equipment. That's a good one. Vending equipment. Guess what? It's going to plug into the wall. So the plug has to be at 300. The vending equipment, I'm going to spec it. It's going to be delivered on site. I'm going to have a representation of this 3D box sitting in the model. I'm going to call it vending equipment. It could be there. It could be moved. It could be anywhere. It'll be managed when the construction's done. It won't even be there when construction is done. So there's no way an as-built model will even have the vending equipment as 300 because it'll probably be purchased once occupancy is given to the owner.
Right.
So it's 200. It can't be higher than that. And then there's conduit down here somewhere. And because that's field routed conduit, it might only ever be 100. So we might have a representation of where something is. If they do point cloud scanning, you might have a record of where it was put underground. Great. But it might just be underground somewhere. And that's a bad record, but this is where you have the dialogue. Look, if you want to spend the money to do a scan for as-built to show where these items are, then we can adjust this. But the expectation is set, especially at the electrical level there. So.
Right. And of course, we can't spend a lot of money to, like convert the object which is not much required.
Exactly. And that goes right back to scope, schedule, budget. So oftentimes when you hear the myth of BIM is expensive and you ask why, well, I spent so much time modeling the conduit that I didn't know where it was. The other thing, just notice in here, sorry, let me go back to here quickly. I don't want to make sure I stay good on time here. Right at the top here, we state, right here, piping smaller than 1 inch will not be modeled. Conduit smaller than 2 inch will not be modeled. And we lay that off the bat right away. You spell it right, first of all. Oh, anyway, whatever. We state that because we want to make sure there isn't that expectation, because smaller than 2 inch can literally be routed anywhere unless there's a specific need. And that's where I'll describe. Imagine a 2 inch conduit, roughly like that, but imagine 20 of them together going through the floor. All of a sudden you have an issue of coordination. But 1 2 inch conduit flying around the open space or just laid in the concrete before they pour the concrete, it is what it is.
Brent, one more question. Just I don't want to waste time. Is there any other name for these matrices? Because I have heard the name MED matrix, MED matrix, for this particular table.
I'm not familiar with do you know what MED stands for? Model element.
I don't know. I have heard the name MED matrix, And also, this sort of matrix were used to produce the COBie data.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, so this matrix, so always when you're delivering to COBie, so COBie is an export to a COBie defined spreadsheet, and you make sure that this matrix then you have to make sure all the components that have to get into COBie are represented here as well, and there's an understanding.
Okay.
MED, I've heard of MEA matrix, and that one, because the LOD matrix out of the box calls here model element author. So I've heard of an MEA. I'm not sure I've heard of MED yet until now.
All right.
Okay. So I'm gonna finish this up quickly. What time is it? Yeah, I'll try. Civil LOD, again, you saw on ours, we added all the civil components because it's actually missing from the spec, and hopefully as they keep adding newer versions of the spec, it gets included. This was done for our Viva Next project in Vaughan, just a massive bus rapid transway, and the civil team said, okay, well, what does 300 mean for these items? So we took a couple items and we actually showed what a 300 model would look like for a road corridor, for a subdrain, for a curb. And then they said, oh, okay. And then we were able to have the dialogue, train them on how to model, and then go forward. Inside the BIM execution plans, I talked about defining goals and uses. These are actually from some plans that I've seen or been privy to in the past. State a goal, and you can see misuse of LOD 300, which just irks me, and then state the use. When you use the term LOD inside these goals, please just say components to LOD or specific components as per the matrix or something like that. Use of the model to advance the automation of cost estimation. So happy when I had that one there. One of these I thought had asset management, but I'm going, it's okay. It's all, oh, here it is. Information exchange to operations in this project. So asset management was a goal. And I've seen that a lot in my career with the water and wastewater treatment plants. Oftentimes, you know, you have your priority, so it defines which ones they're really looking at. Then the use table, really this one here say, okay, good, we've defined a use that we want. Now, when in the plan, design, construct, operate lifecycle, will that use really kick in? And oftentimes, you know, in the design world, I'll just see by default, they'll say, well, here they all are. And I'll say, but think about the life cycle. Don't just automatically put an X on design because the scope of the BIM execution plan is only for design. So I'll challenge people when I see this and I'll say, well, look, if we're doing design authorship, won't that affect record modeling because we're going to be advancing things throughout construction, even if it's just a design project? Coordination, well, won't we be coordinating during the construction phase of the project as well? And, you know, I'll keep asking those questions. Oh, here's those phases. So in the BIM execution, sorry, in the LOD matrix, I highlight, I just have AIA listed there, but these are the most common, the 4 phase of AIA, the percentages, and then the REBA, 1 to 7, the new REBA. But my goodness, you could have any of these. I've been on mass manufacturing projects, and I'll be told I was part of FEED. So I remember when I started oil and gas, I didn't know what FEED was until it was finally explained to me. Front-end engineering design is basically schematic and design development. I said, okay, whatever, it is what it is. So it was good to be able to understand how these all relate to each other. The concept of the data drop, data turnovers, UK term, love it. I'm seeing it used more and more in North America. And it just, what is that data turnover? The COBie data drop is it's heavily used in the UK as well. But your data drop does not have to be COBie. So in North America, the data drop is the digital turnover, when and how often. And, you know, drop 1 to 4 is is the loose definition from the UK. You could have multiple drops depending on what your contract outlines. And then the process maps, which I'll be closing with here. We get into more detail, or we'll see them again later, I think in week 12. After we go through everything, we circle back to the maps. So this is just an introduction to the process maps. So don't get scared, it's all good. Level 1 and level 2. So basically what Penn State has said was, let's have one map that talks about everything. And this is the map. And it's crazy-ish, but it's good. So the way all these process maps work is they have a start, a bunch of process, and a finish. From each process, there's defined areas of information exchange, either an input or an output. And if we just focus in here, the overall level 1, this is just the entire process. You have some sort of a program to validate, so you need a program, you need some data. This is kind of your EIR. What are you building? What does the client want? What are you BIMing? Why are you BIMing it? What's the project about? You need all that data, all that info. Build a model, schematic design, and you have an output. Here's my deliverable for 30% design, schematic design. From that model, you could do any number of BIM uses. So this is just example, but you could have all those uses go through some type of a box owned by somebody. So the contractor owning the 4D model, the architect owning the prototype analysis, the architect doing coordination. And then you have a whole bunch of outputs from those. And then you repeat. Do design development, deliverable, further the uses, your output, construction documents, get up to 90, 100%, do your deliverable, further your uses, deliver those. A whole host of things happen in construction, represented by one tiny little box here, and then you feed the record model, whatever that ends up being. Now, then it says, great, level 2, let you delve in. So from a level 2 perspective, it then takes each BIM use. So design authorship, yeah, so I just pasted them all in here. So design authorship, very quickly, you have your program, you identify what's required. So remember all these elements of the BXP. Identify what's required, identify the content you need. You have parametric modeling. So you might be referencing in a Rhino, a Grasshopper, maybe a SketchUp model, a concept model, whatever. Develop the model. You have a preliminary model, a bunch of disciplines. Again, your deliverable, schematic, design, construct. So these process maps are based on the 4 phases. So there's always going to be those deliverables. And then you go through. Is everything good? Yes, proceed. Further the models. Is everything good? Yes, proceed. Further the models. Okay. Once you have the models, you can then do a design review. So to do a design review, I need a design model. The design model comes from any one of these outputs. I have these models. I can now take in the model, go through the review process, create a mock-up, Navisworks, Navigator, Celebri, whatever it is. Is it info to go to an operations asset management system? What am I compiling? Do the review. Validate everything's good. You have an output. This is what was reviewed. Did it work? Etc. Coordination, same thing. Here we're introducing clashes. So again, you have the input of the model. You have a whole bunch of preparatory items feeding in information, etc. You run your clashes, compile, do your thing. Did it work? And this process is actually very important because oftentimes the process of the clash resolution is not fulfilled. So are there any collisions? Yes. Do something with it. Don't just say, oh, found clashes and away they go. And that's why the project manager is so important in this, as well as look, all the disciplines. Coordinator runs the disciplines, identify solutions to collisions. Do you know how important and how that box doesn't get done? And it's catastrophic when that doesn't get done. Maybe that's a little dramatic, but still, it's bad, right? 4D schedule simulation. Again, same concept. You have the model, you have information on your schedule. You have this flow of a schedule creation, this linkage to the model, and then you have your simulation. Now, notice this. Somebody put in here, and I like it, a 4D modeler. The burden is not on the BIM coordinator or the BIM lead to do all of that connectivity to the schedule. It has to be planned. So this link 3D elements to the activities of the schedule, how is that to be done? So if we're doing the BIM use of 4D schedule simulation, the biggest myth is, great, let's do it. BIM lead, it's all on you. Response back, no way. Where's the team to achieve this? Same with the cost estimation. You know, cost estimation is actually a described role, a prescribed role under provincial legislation. Like it's a role like an architect, like an engineer, as is scheduler, defined roles. So these processes occur, again, inputs of the model. All that design model is so profusely important. And obviously, if this is being done at schematic design, the modeled components are to a lower level of development. Therefore, the accuracy of the cost estimation or the schedule simulation is taken into account. Lesser accuracy, we're earlier in the project. So I'm not going to dwell on these, but you can see each one has a process, and we'll talk more about them later on once we do more and more. These last examples were alternate level ones that I had made in my career. People will say, I don't understand that level one. I say, all right, let me consolidate it and make it smaller. You have inputs, drawings, models, etc. You have this team that makes the BIM. From that BIM, you have all of these defined uses we agreed on the project, and then we deliver milestones. And I'd hear, oh, that's easier. All right, and I'd say it's the same as the Penn State, just prettier or different. Here's another one, prettier, not prettier, I don't know. You have input, you have a team, kickoff meeting, you go through this review cycle of model, where am I? Model over here, get your Navisworks, find your clashes, identify, resolve, have your review meetings over here, funnel it back into this stream to the model, weekly meetings with the team, on the spot, over the shoulder coordination. Once I'm in my Navisworks, record modeling, all this stuff. People say that's easier to see. Great, it all comes back to this. It all comes back to chaos to order. That's what the BIM execution plan is meant to do. And if I've ended by giving you more chaos, it's okay. I'm going to stop there. These last two slides, what was the just the gist is, this isn't a new role. The role's been around forever. That was the myth I talked about at the first class. Engage from the very beginning. I put myself and my team up to say, come and grab us and figure it out, and complex versus non-complex. Don't dwell on the budget of the role, because at the end of the day, it should be woven into the process, but there's mechanisms to figure out how to budget if you're doing simple BIM versus complex. And with that, that's all I had for today. So if everybody's still awake, that's awesome. It's early in the morning. Comments, questions. And if not, it's okay, because I'm going to get you all talking in 5 weeks. So I'll get you. I always say I can't wait for, what is it, April, whatever it is, where I just sit down and you all talk. I just listen. It'll be cool. So next week, we are going to jump into software fun. I'll put in, I forgot to put a reminder at the start of this week. The quiz will close, I'll put it in the reminder, but I think it closes next week prior to class, something like that. But I'll put in the reminder, if you haven't done the quiz, do the quiz. And the next discussion opens up tomorrow morning. And it's for me to see some insights on what you know about software. So with that, thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. And I'll see you next Friday, bright and early and smiling, and yes.
Thanks, Brent.
All right. Have a good day, everybody. Bye for now.